All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I know some people are still getting on the call as well, but I just wanted to first introduce myself. My name is Bridget Gallagher, and I am the digital event specialist at Built In. So I will be here behind the scenes today. So I'm going to kick things off with some housekeeping before we get going. So just a couple things for you to know. You will be muted throughout the webinar, but if you have any comments or insights, please drop those into the chat so that the entire group can benefit. We love when there's a conversation going on, so feel free to send some messages. If you have questions for our speakers, you can put that into the Q&A function, which is separate from the chat. That just helps us keep those questions separate. And if we have any time at the end, we are hoping to get to those questions today. So we'll keep an eye on that. And finally, we will send out the recording later on today, so you can rewatch or send to any of your colleagues or friends who might be interested in the panel today. So that is it from me, and I would like to hand things over to our host, Kelly Keegan.
Hello, everyone. I am Kelly Keegan. I am the VP of People at Built In, and so excited to be having this conversation with everyone today. Before we switch over into the panel discussion, I just want to take a moment, and everybody on the call, if you could just close your eyes and let's all just take a collective inhale together. In through your nose and exhale, let it out. And let's just do that one more time. Inhale in through your nose and exhale. As women in tech, we do a lot, and I hope those 2 deep breaths were an opportunity for you to really presence and be here now. So we always like to start out by sharing a little bit about what we do here at Built In. We help talented tech professionals stay on top of industry trends and news, expand their networks, and carve out futures at companies they believe in. More than 2.7 million professionals visit our site monthly. That includes engineers, data scientists, ops, product professionals, as well as people in tech adjacent roles like sales and marketing. So we're going to dive straight into our panel today. I'm really excited. We have a long list of questions and cannot wait to hear from these amazing leaders. So first off, we have our very own CEO and founder of Built In, Maria Katras. Maria, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Kelly. And for all of you that are new to Built In, Kelly, I think I put it in the chat, leads us through breathing exercises and meditations all the time. I used to say no way, and now I'm embracing it, and it is the best thing I've incorporated into my life. So thank you, Kelly, for that. Maria Katras, founder and CEO of Built In. I'm so glad to have you all here today and excited to share the stage with these awesome panelists and awesome women in tech. I am a mother, a wife, a sister, a daughter, and all of the above, first and foremost. And secondly, I lead this amazing team of about 220 growing to 300 people at Built In on a daily basis, and really looking to change the world and empower people to help them build the future of tech. So super excited to have you all, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Maria. And shameless plug, Built In is hiring. As Maria just mentioned, we're growing. So feel free to check out our jobs. All right, and now I will introduce Stacey Kraft, who's the Chief People Officer at Innova International. Stacey, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Terrific. So I am the Chief People Officer at Innova International. We are about a 1,500 person fintech company that provides online financial services to small businesses and consumers. We are headquartered in Chicago, and our hybrid remote workforce will be returning back to our offices in May, 3 days a week. So we're excited about that. I live in the Irving Park neighborhood in Chicago. My husband and 2 kids, 2 high school aged kids, and 90-pound golden retriever. And have spent the majority of my career here in Chicago Tech.
Awesome. Thank you, Stacey. Excited to have you here. And then finally, our third speaker today is Suzanne Willard, who's the VP of Engineering at VideoAmp. Suzanne, if you could introduce yourself to the group.
Yes, hi, I'm Suzanne Willard. I am currently located in Bend, Oregon, working for a company that is remote during the COVID. We are also returning back to a hybrid work environment, although I will stay remote considering I'm in the middle of nowhere. So I've been in IT for about 24 years as a software engineer for the first 16. While I was raising my kids, I've got two amazing kids and a wonderful husband and lots of animals, cats, dogs, fish. About 7 years ago, I was thrust into a management position and I really found that I liked it. So with my kids grown, I wanted to see what I could do. So I really focused on my career. And I've been at VideoAmp for a little over a year now. I still love it. It's just the best company. Shameless plug, we are also hiring. And yeah, I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome, thank you. We're so excited to have all three of you here today. So hearing a bit from all of you about your background, it's obvious that this panel has pretty different roles. And I'm sure you've all had pretty different backgrounds and experience as well over the years when it comes to your careers. But I'm wondering, do any major moments stand out when thinking about how you've landed the career that you have now? Anything that propelled your career forward or maybe made you pivot in a major way? Stacy, let's start with you. One moment. All right. In the meantime, Suzanne, we'll pivot over to you.
Sure, no problem. What I've really found is that each thing that I've done has kind of laid the groundwork for my next position. And it's been uncanny the way that that has worked out. I worked in systems integrations at Starbucks and learned a lot about security. And then because of that, I got hired at my next company. And then there was a reorg and I had to build a data warehouse and was doing a lot of, vendor management, which got me my next position was exactly what I needed for that. And things I did there prepared me for what I'm doing in my current role. So it's been no like major things happening at once, but it is really amazing how, and not on purpose and not by design, but how each thing I've done seemed to be like the perfect thing for my next job.
Great, thanks, Suzanne. Seems like Stacy, are you here? You're having some technical difficulties?
Yes, aren't we always? Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Yeah, I was actually reflecting, and I do have a moment that I feel like was pretty pivotal in my career. So early on, I was working at a startup and I loved it. And that little startup was acquired by what's now Thomson Reuters. And, it was great experience, but I was sort of not going to commit to staying at a big corporation. And I was really ready to find my next startup experience. But I had a great manager and a couple mentors that encouraged me to stay for just 1 year. They said, you might not want to resign at Thomson Reuters, but you're going to learn a ton and you should commit to kind of 1 year and just soak up all that you can. And that 1 year actually turned into 7 and probably one of the best decisions of my career. I didn't realize how much you could learn from a 200, 300 person global HR team. I got exposed to so much, like saw HR programs at scale and, saw employment law across multiple countries, got to experience acquisitions on both sides, and frankly, just got to work with people that, were far more experienced and senior to me. So I guess my takeaway is that just, be open to new experiences. I was at that time, I didn't think I wanted to be, but I was. And I love that one of my mentors encouraged me to kind of time box that decision. So sort of like give it a year, which to me made me be able to make the decision quicker. And then also, so it helped to expedite the decision-making process and it helped me to kind of commit to the decision and then kind of reassess at a later time. So that was one of the memories that I had.
Thanks, Stacey. I actually had a very similar experience where a mentor of mine told me to give a change a year. And it's really amazing how impactful it can be when you just embrace that change. It might not be exactly what you had expected it to be, but it ends up looking back being a really, really pivotal part of my career. Thanks so much for sharing that. Maria, how about you? Anything that stands out?
I think, I'll continue with the theme of, mentor influence here. But there were a couple of pivotal moments in my career. The first being my very first manager out of undergrad in consulting, who just looked at me one day and said, okay, time for you to leave consulting. So you're going to go volunteer and you're going to go get your MBA, and you have no business staying here as long as I did. So you're going to go. And it was plain and simple. He was like, this is not your home permanently. And he essentially pushed me out the door because he knew this wasn't where I was going to be long-term. And and that led me to every pivot afterward. I did volunteer. That's where I met a very good friend who, 3 years later was the reason I started my first business, because she took me to an event with entrepreneurs and the light bulb went off. And that propelled me to where I am today, right? So, there are so many critical moments within that, but I'll never forget where I was standing in the office, right? It has so much impact on you, especially when you have that mentor / manager who's looking out for your best interests. So that was the big one for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Maria. So we'll continue talking about mentorship, and I'll give everybody here a little sneak peek. Our webinar next month will focus even more on mentorship. And this first question I will toss to someone who I consider one of my most impactful mentors, Maria. So Maria, who are a variety of mentors that you have had throughout your career who have helped you grow? And also tell me a little bit about how you mentor others today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've shared this story a lot recently as we just went through our review cycle. But the manager I actually mentioned earlier was literally not only a mentor to me, a really good friend to me, but he also informed my leadership style to this very day. And there was one scenario that I always share with our team here internally when I'm talking to new managers, where it was my first project right out of undergrad. I was 22. Sitting in a war room in, Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey. And there was a partner on the project, a very new manager on the project, and an analyst maybe a year or two ahead of me. And in front of everyone, the manager goes, who's my mentor, he goes, okay, Maria, can you run this query in Access for me? And I'm like, okay, because this was like me starting to learn how to use Access at the time to run queries. I must have struggled with the thing for like 2 hours, literally 2 hours. Didn't say a thing. I gave it to him and he was like, this is awesome. This is great, etc. What I didn't know until almost a year later is that he ran that query in 5 minutes. He ran it. He was off and running to the races, and he just let me struggle for 2 hours so I could learn it. And then he never told me. And he completely gave me the credit for said project. And so to this day, it informs how I think about leading teams, how I think about empowering my people, and also how I put them in the spotlight. And so it was just one of the coolest examples and I share it very broadly. So that was mine.
Thanks, Maria. And we actually have a question in the chat that I'm going to have Stacy have you answer, along with telling us about any mentors that stand out through your career, any guidance that you have about individuals who are trying to find a mentor.
So let me share, just as I was reflecting on a kind of a great mentor that I've had, and then let me come back to the guidance, in terms of finding someone, because it could be related. So I've had several, I guess, great mentors, mostly informal, but one in particular who was really influential to me, because I think she was just literally like a couple of years ahead of me, kind of in work and in life. And so she literally was able to show me the ropes across everything that I was doing and thinking about and stressed out about, or not knowing that I should be stressed out about something. But and that was actually really, really helpful. She helped me to navigate not only work and career stuff, but kids and school and childcare and essentially everything kind of in between. Her style for me was a great match because she was super positive and practical and provided just really helpful support. which was really, I think, pivotal to kind of me at that stage in my career. Since then, I think I have, every year I take on 3 mentees at work, which is a great number to kind of have, and a kind of a mix of people, senior leaders at our company. And then I've also actually become an informal mentor to a handful of other women, maybe a couple men, who have navigated cancer in their lives. As a cancer survivor, I just felt like I had a lot of good experience to share, and advice and support. And that's actually been really gratifying. So maybe back to the question is, I think your mentors are all around, and it maybe doesn't have to be like a formal thing, but you kind of find someone that you gravitate to, that you connect really well with, that you're really comfortable. And whether you officially, formally ask them to be your mentor, or it's just someone that you can kind of reach out to. I think knowing how it feels like to be on the other side and being pinged a lot, like it's really gratifying as a mentor. So don't be shy about just thinking about your network and reaching out to people who you think could help support you in your journey.
Thanks, Stacey. I think that's really great advice. I think something that I personally reflect upon is like, how do I take ownership of that? And not necessarily think sometimes we can set the expectation that the mentor has to own the responsibility of that relationship and give us all the information, when in reality, we all have the opportunity to reflect upon those that we're interacting with and being like, what did I learn from that person? What did I learn from that interaction? And I think that's really powerful. And if you look at it that way, then you could have mentors all over the place. They might not know that they're your mentor, but it's just an opportunity for you to learn and grow. Suzanne, how about you? Any mentors that stand out throughout your career?
Yes, my first manager in IT was a very strong woman, and what she really taught me was how to see people as individuals. And in particular, I took this when I became a manager myself, but not even, I guess, when I was an IC, to see people as individuals in my management style and to respond to what motivates individual people. So I think watching her really taught me so much on how to do my job and how to interact with people. And she was very strong but very well respected. And so I really got to watch her. And then in turn, I noticed in growing up, and then even as my own daughter became an adult herself, she watched very closely the things that I did in my career. And we would talk, she would come home from work and she would talk about the things that she was going through. And as a woman in the workforce, talking about the different things that she would go through, and then just having that interaction and things that I was going through, and became a mentor to her, but also a mentee of her. So it's almost like a kind of a partnership there. And that I found was just as enlightening. Being a mentor, just as enlightening as being a mentee. And so, yeah, very impactful, both of those.
I think that's beautiful. It's great, especially if you've been fortunate enough to have mentors all throughout your career to be able to then pay that forward. All right, so moving on to our next topic, let's get into planning. At young ages, people are more likely to job hop, trying out different types of roles. And over the pandemic, data shows that 20% of the US workforce switched careers, and even more are still considering or working towards change in their careers as well. So I'm wondering, when first starting out, did you have a plan for your future? Did you ever sit down and plan out what you hope to accomplish? And if so, did it turn out the way you thought? Suzanne, let's start with you.
Definitely not. I did not have a specific goal, and I don't think I do now. Every decision I've made, every career choice I've made has been about the lifestyle that I want. I unfortunately never had that like super hard passion about something other than raising my kids. And so I spent the early part of my career, I was a respiratory therapist before I went into IT. And so I'm one of those people who switched careers. But it was really all about having that freedom to be able to raise, be there for my kids, but then also have a career of my own. And then once my kids got older, that's when I really started feeling like, okay, let me see, guilt-free, or, you know, whatever it was for me, I wanted to be able to just see how far I could go and really pour everything into that. But it was always about, first of all, I'm 100% or nothing. So no matter what I did, I was always wanted to be the best at what I did. So I always worked really hard. And even when I was, wasn't focusing on a career per se, I still tried to be the best at what I was doing as a software engineer. And so I tend to do that. I bring that in what I'm doing now, which is, and yeah, but I wish I could say I had this grand plan and it all worked out, but I really didn't have anything laid out. And I don't think I do now. I very much operate on how I'm feeling. And I let that guide when I leave a company, or how long I want to work for. And I think about that. I'm thinking about that now. But nothing that I really planned for. I'm very run on instinct kind of person.
I'm sure most of the folks on this panel and also in the audience can relate to wanting to be the best at whatever they're doing. Stacy, anything that you want to add?
I mean, I echo what Suzanne said. I did not have a plan. And those people who might have known me in my 20s, that would not kind of come as a surprise. In college, I switched majors a million times. I ultimately graduated with a degree in geography from Indiana University. And thank goodness I had an older brother who said, just graduate in 4 years, get out, get a job, and you'll figure it out from there. And I'm proud to say that I feel like I kind of figured it out. But honestly, my path started in sales because I didn't know what I wanted to do. It led to recruiting that eventually ended up in HR. But I didn't plan it that way. And looking back, I'm kind of grateful that I didn't have an official formal plan, because I think it gave me some freedom to take some risks and try different jobs. And I think if I had like a structured formal plan, I would have narrowed the opportunities I accepted and ultimately experienced. So, but that's, everyone's different. Some people like the structure of that. But for me, I'm glad I took kind of the open path.
I love that. So embrace the future for whatever it may be. And as somebody who went to college to be a high school history teacher and now leads people, I clearly have taken a totally different path that I had planned on. So looking beyond day-to-day roles, what should women do outside of their companies to advance their careers, whether that's networking, courses, or even personal activities? Maria, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. Network. And I'm saying this because I think we all invest in ourselves through education and skills learning and, mentors. And we talk about that a lot, but I think what we don't talk about enough is how women just don't network enough. And I had 2 female executives in my life who are good friends of mine and who are probably a stage or 2 in front of me, who both gave me the same advice, one early in my career and one later in my career. The one early in my career said, you go to every event you can. Even if you get one thing out of that event, it was worth it. And just think about it that way. Don't set your expectations that it should be this big bang sort of learning for you. But if you got one thing out of it, it was worth your time. And the second female executive gave me this feedback in the last 5 years in my current role as CEO. And she said, you take every invite. You take the invite and you go. Because in doing that, you're not only building your network, but you're establishing yourself, your reputation, your business, et cetera. And I've really taken that advice to heart. And in the last 5 years, every time, it's too easy to go from work to home. I have 3 kids, right? And an amazing husband. But it's like every time I say yes, I don't regret it. I don't regret it. And it's super important to foster your network. And I know a lot of you in the chat have been asking, like, how do you find a mentor, right? And Stacy said the same thing I would say, which is my mentors have always been informal or people I've worked with or for. And the way you build those is through networking, right? If you don't have them within your own company or your manager isn't considered a mentor, network. network. Every event, every conversation is just an opportunity for an informal mentorship. And that it has informed a lot of my growth throughout my career.
Great. Thanks so much, Maria. Suzanne, how about anything that you would add to that?
Absolutely. I 100% agree on the networking. Events like this and other, I've been to in-person events back before COVID, and they've always just been really fantastic. Another thing that I've done is I've actually gone on LinkedIn and looked for folks that were in the same job as I was moving up, and just reached out and said, hey, I would love to connect, and I'd love to just get on a call and chat about our jobs and our work. And I've had such an overwhelmingly positive response to that, and met a lot of people in that way and kept in touch. And so sometimes it might feel a little bit awkward. That was actually advice that was given to me by somebody. And it at first was a very difficult thing to do, but I have found just the best advice, and listening to other people in the same position I'm in, and how they approach it and things that they struggle with. And it was, that's definitely, I recommend that. Also staying current within your field, wherever you are, and especially in tech. I'm not coding anymore, but I stay current so that I can have intelligent conversations. And one of the things that I have found, especially as a woman, you're always trying to go the extra mile to maintain and get that respect. And so that is something that I do to be able to converse with other people in tech, and then just, my peers and all. And then for me, I just really like to stay up on it. But I found that to stay current and relevant, no matter what you're doing, it definitely helps. It helps keep you fresh and keep you fresh in your job.
Yeah, I want to actually double click on one of the things that you shared, because it's one of my favorite things to share with folks, especially more junior employees, is like thinking about what is the position that you strive to be in, whether in 10 years from now, and going on LinkedIn and finding people with that title to see their background. How long were they in their roles? What companies did they work at, what size, et cetera. And so I think that's really impactful. And then I think it can also be, and I know we've had some comments in the chat and questions around networking. I think even just attending events like this, even if you're not directly having a one-on-one conversation with someone, that's networking, that's getting to know individuals. And that is really, really impactful if you can sit down after this webinar and think, what are the key takeaways? How do I connect that reflection and then use that moving forward? I think is a really, really huge help. So a recent study found that 59% of organizations are seeing a major or moderate impact on business due to lack of digitally skilled employees. How have you overcome tech talent shortages recently? And what are your biggest takeaways from leading these teams in your current role and past roles? Stacey, have you all been dealing with any of that?
Oh, no, not at all. Right. I actually think it's two things I have in mind. One is, I think everyone that you hire, I was just kind of reflecting on my career and the people that we've hired, look to hire people that are smart, driven, adaptable, mature, have versatile skills. Given the turnover levels, and I don't think those are going to subside anytime soon, people are going to be asked to fill in, plug in, step up, take on something that they didn't think that they were going to take on. And some people thrive in those environments and other people do not. And I think, back in my startup days, we called those people builders, people that are curious and smart, awesome problem solvers, like no drama, like go find those people. Honestly, I think those folks are really would be coming into an organization at a critical time, and I think would serve you well. The other thing I was thinking about is don't just rely on your recruiting team to hire. Shift the mindset in your organization so that kind of your entire hiring teams, your entire kind of staff are always hiring. Teach them how to recruit and then support their efforts. We've taken this approach at Inova this year, just given the number of open positions that we had to fill quickly. And we've actually been able to hire faster and with better results. than when we simply relied on our small but mighty recruiting team. So those are kind of two things that came to mind.
Great, thank you so much. Maria, I know firsthand that we've been dealing with this. Anything that you would like to share?
So plus one to everything Stacy said. I think we had an all hands this morning, and I essentially said the same thing of, our people team ended up getting, licenses to all of our team, train them how to source, et cetera. And really at the end of the day, for everyone on this call, we work with people we want to work with because there are plenty of choices out there. And so ultimately, job seekers want to know who they're working for and with. And so the likelihood of them responding to their direct manager because they're excited or impressed or et cetera is way higher than them responding to yet another recruiter spamming them on LinkedIn, right? It just is what it is. And so, and part of that is also the network, right? So figuring out relationships, attending events, getting to know people that you otherwise wouldn't know, and differentiating from the vast amount of companies out there who are also hiring for that same role. I think there is one school of thought that salary is everything, but it's not. And there's articles coming out now that people who jump just for salary are regretting that decision, right? And so I think there's going to be more onus on each and every one of us to talk about our culture, how we lead, how we mentor, our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, et cetera. There are so many other elements of a company, and you all heard it today. We all found mentors as our first managers, right? We need to talk about what good leadership looks like and sharing what good leadership looks like. And if your manager isn't at all your mentor, I'd question that, right? If they're not helping you in any way, like I would question that. And there are plenty of amazing mentors and leaders out there to work for and really exploring what's out there from that lens, not just salary, right? And that would ultimately be my recommendation. And yes, empower everyone in your company to recruit. It's all of our jobs.
Thanks, Maria. So we have a lot of questions rolling in from the audience, which I'm super excited about. So we're going to pivot to take some of those. And on the topic of, switching careers, Maria's advice around if you're not learning from your manager. One of the questions that came in is around how do you gauge when it's the right time to move companies or roles? And so I will open that up to anybody here on the panel who would like to answer that. What recommendation would you have around knowing when to switch companies or roles?
I'll jump in. I guess I'd say think about, maybe before you decide that you might need to leave, think about why you joined in the first place, and whether that was 6 months ago or 6 years ago. Think about the reasons that brought you to that company and that role, and ask yourself, like, did you accomplish all that you had hoped? And if not, why? And if there were, if you really think through it, and then maybe leverage a mentor, a colleague, a friend, a family member, just use someone as a sounding board, right? But then figure out, like, oh, okay, wait, I didn't accomplish all of that, but you're not sure you can, because you're maybe, like Maria was talking about culture, maybe you're just like not really motivated around that particular culture. It's not good or bad. It's just like a decision that you sort of come to. So anyways, my advice is think about the reasons that brought you there, and then evaluate kind of more intentionally on whether it's time for you to leave. Because sometimes it's actually not. Sometimes you just need to dust off like I still have more to do, and time box it, and give yourself 6 months, give yourself a year, and figure out if you can kind of drive toward whatever those goals are. And then make it, then reassess and make a decision.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice, Stacey. I also like to make sure that when somebody asks me that question, I say that you're running towards something and not running from something, because I think that's oftentimes why people make a switch. So Maria or Suzanne, anything that you would want to add on that question?
I would say actually what Maria was saying before, and that is, do you feel like you're getting what you need? Do you feel like for me, it is often my manager and that manager and kind of going up the line, and are these people who I respect? Are these people who I want to aspire to impress? And that is a lot of what keeps me at a place. Am I still learning? That's a huge part for me. Do I have the opportunities in any way, whether it's learning the job or tech or mentoring, or am I still growing myself? And that's a big part. And then sometimes you have to leave a company to make those evolutionary leaps, either in skill or in the job or in pay, or, and so any of those things can be a factor. But for me, a lot of it is because I've worked so often where I did not respect the people around me or the people I was reporting to, finding a place which I have now where I really respect my manager and the manager above him and above him makes such a huge difference. And it's actually pretty rare in my experience.
Yeah, thanks for that. I want to emphasize the question that you said, which is, are you still learning? That's a really, really good one to ask yourself. So in the chat, somebody had noted or asked the question, does anyone else find networking challenging due to time constraints? Sometimes I'm just so slammed at work that finding any time or energy can be hard. And this is something that Maria and I actually talk about pretty frequently around making space for the things that are going to give you energy. And I'm very fortunate that I get this advice from Maria all the time. So I'm going to make sure that she shares it with all of you today. Maria, what recommendation would you have to this question?
It's exactly that. Honestly, it's what Kelly said. You have to know yourself and be self-aware, right? I'm actually an introvert. My profile is an introverted profile. And a lot of people are shocked when they hear that, because if you know me, I do speak a lot and I do, try to get out there a decent amount, but it's not where I get my energy from. So for me, I've had to practice self-care, like, sitting in my room by myself, watching the Hallmark Channel. It's a true story, but like, that is what revives me. I have to not talk to anyone for extended periods of time. And unfortunately that does take a hit to sometimes my friendships and things like that, because I am just not one to get on the phone and talk a lot after, running the company all day long and then having 3 kids, 2 of which are teenagers. So, but for other people, and I see this all the time with our sales org and other departments within Built-In, where their profiles are high social profiles. So their energy comes from being around humans. They need that to feel alive and to be at their height and their highest performance. They need to come together as a team. They need to do social activities. So I think it's just recognizing that it's not a one size fits all approach, and understanding like what fuels you and making the space for it. Whether it's forced vacation, forced time off, forced networking, whatever it means to fuel you, it's both personally and professionally, is just really critical. And we use a tool that helps us understand our profiles a little bit better and what drives our energy units. And I would highly recommend that if you haven't assessed yourself in any one of these tools, do it, because it is really eye-opening to really reflect on what is good for you as an individual versus what's good for people around you.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Maria. Suzanne or Stacy, anything that you would add?
I mean, maybe the only thing I'd say is if depending on how you're wired, because there's like never enough time in the day and you're just exhausted and you want to talk to people, because we talk to people all day long. But you could also just give yourself a goal, like 5 reach outs a month. I mean, honestly, or something. I don't know what the number is, but whatever the number is. And it will put it on your kind of to-do list or wherever you track the stuff that you get done. And it might just be a good reminder and kind of force you to kind of reach out on LinkedIn, reach out to someone new, but give yourself some grace, because days and weeks get quite busy.
Awesome. So a couple of things that you said, Stacey, that I just want to point out. Give yourself some grace. That's a really, really important thing. It's often something that I have on a Post-it note next to me, because I can be really hard on myself and create a lot of pressure around, I have to do all of these things and I have to lead all the time with passion and control. And it's just sometimes you just really have to give yourself some grace and be forgiving. And then the other piece around making time for that effort, whether that is networking, whether that is taking a course, whether that's just taking some you time for yourself. I often find myself, if I don't plan for it, it doesn't happen. So that means if it's not blocked on my calendar in advance, even if it's 3 weeks out. If it's not there, inevitably something's going to get scheduled over it. And so it's about making time for it, intentional time. Another question that we had from the group in the Q&A: what sacrifices do you feel you had to make as a woman compared to your male counterparts at your same level? How have you overcome double standards that you encountered during your career? Suzanne, I'm going to start with you on this question. As VP of Engineering in a pretty male-dominated field, how would you respond?
A lot of sacrifices. I have always felt like I work twice as hard to get half the respect. That's how I've always put it. But you have to be better. And that's how I've always felt. And so I have always worked that hard. And that, of course, is a sacrifice in time. And sometimes it's a sacrifice in pride. It's a sacrifice. There's a desire to educate those with unconscious bias. And then there's also and I talk with my daughter about this all the time, because it's very easy to be angry or to be very frustrated. And what has helped me is to really try to understand where people are coming from and what is actually unintentional, right? And try to understand and try to, it's not okay, but it's not, you have to kind of gate yourself in terms of how you're reacting to it, so that you don't become your own worst enemy when these things happen. I have been in a situation where I've been in an official HR contest against someone who was being very biased against me as a woman. I was not the only person. And I lost that battle. It was a battle and I lost that battle. And despite a bunch of evidence, and it was very frustrating. But what came out of that was a couple of things. My daughter's respect. She watched me go through that, and she watched me never give up and never give in, and keep my self-respect and stand up for myself. And so these were things that she said, I really respect you, and you're really teaching me how to handle these kinds of things. And even though I lost that battle, what she learned was when you challenge things, you don't always win, but it is really important. Your self-respect is the most important thing, and standing up for yourself, despite the risk. I could have not taken any risk and kept a job that made me feel ultimately just terrible. But self-respect is like the most important thing, and ended up with me in a job that's like so much better. And things tend to have a way of working themselves out. But I think the sacrifices you make are the risks that you take that are just not there for men. And there's constantly gauging reaction, gauging how my daughter would come home from work and talk about something, and my husband would say, "Oh, why don't you just do this?" And I'm like, "No, that's not an option for her. It would be an option for you as a man, but it's not an option for her." And so that's a sacrifice. That's a huge sacrifice, because it can really weigh you down if you let it. But then you have to also kind of just say, "Hey, here's what I'm willing to accept." And sometimes you do, because you do want to get ahead, or you do want to understand that not everybody has an evil intent. And so you don't want to let yourself get weighed down with anger, which would be so easy to do. But I think so that's the sacrifice. The sacrifice is the constant mental energy that you put out. And it is constant. And while things have gotten better, some things haven't. The underlying, just recently I was talking with all my peers are men. And so we were talking, and one of them said, "Yeah, this event that we just had," he said, "I have a lot of unconscious bias, but I feel like I'm really working on it and doing a good job." And I was like, you understand that unconscious bias means you're not aware of it. So how are you working on? And I said, I would really challenge you. Have you ever actually asked a woman you're working with what kind of unconscious bias they deal with on a daily basis? Because if you haven't, you probably don't know. And if you really want to work on it, I would challenge you to do that. And it was not confrontational at all. So I do try to educate wherever I can. And it did make the room feel uncomfortable, but it was, sometimes you do that. Sometimes you take those steps because you just kind of, in that case, for me, it was like an instant, like, oh my gosh, you just don't get it. And it's annoying. And so you kind of are always gauging how you respond to something. And there's an effort to educate and an effort to understand. It's a sacrifice because it's mentally exhausting.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Suzanne, for sharing all of that. I know that everyone in the chat appreciates it, and I appreciate it as well. Stacey, I would love to know, in your role as Chief People Officer, I would imagine you probably get questions like this frequently, or women coming to you asking somewhat similar to what Suzanne was sharing. What is your recommendation around if you feel like there's any sort of unconscious bias that exists? Like, how would you approach that?
You know, I try to kind of coach people. I want to obviously understand, because there are conscious and unconscious bias that happens all over, kind of, and not just in the workforce. But I also try to help people sort of recognize that they, kind of like what Suzanne, like, you have an opportunity and you have some control in terms of how you react to that. So sometimes it's like, we got to escalate and we need to take care of something. Sometimes it's like, you know, I think people have differences of opinion. Let's talk it through and let's just move on. You know, sometimes it's like, yeah, I think that was really an emotional reaction, and maybe there really wasn't anything there from a third party, you know, just kind of being that sounding board. But I do try to make sure that people don't get, like Suzanne was saying, sometimes it can get real heavy. And then you get in your head and then you talk to someone else and that becomes a big thing. And I don't know, I coach a lot on just kind of being able to recognize, acknowledge, and then move forward. We have to keep moving forward. And I think maybe we were put on this planet because we are capable of doing all that, like, honestly. So I don't know, I think that's how I tend to coach, kind of choose how you react. You know, and make sure that you're leveraging people as good sounding boards. But like I was saying, I don't know. I feel like I was just reflecting on I was at a school event, and my husband and I were there, and we were introducing ourselves to other people. And 9 times out of 10 in these circles, people asked what my husband did for a living. Nobody asked me. And you know, to me, I was like, I was more frustrated at that than I have been in like a workplace setting. And I don't know, just different state of mind, but I think we experience that in lots of pockets of our lives.
Yeah, that would very much annoy me. Maria, I think, you know, it's interesting, this question around sacrifices as a woman. And I know that we've had conversations and we've been on panel events where, you know, there's a level of frustration around, like, you would never ask a man, how do you balance it all? How are you a dad and like a CEO? And as a co-founder and a CEO in a male-dominated environment, Maria, I would love to hear your perspective on just in general those questions as a whole when folks answer that. And yeah, would love to have you share.
Somewhat similar to what Stacey said, you have to control what you can control, right? And if, you know, what I've always said to people is, if you allow yourself to spiral with one comment, you miss so many opportunities along the way. And there's only so much you can change in others. But what you can control is your own success and how you react to things, how you show up every day, and what you do to move forward. You know, have there been sacrifices? Absolutely. You know, do I get treated differently at times? Absolutely. But what I always say is, it's never stopped me. And you know, I'm still successful in spite of all of it. And I will continue to lead by example. And what I take very seriously at Built In, as indicative, you know, we're almost a 60% female workforce, is it is our job to lead by example. And the biggest impact I personally can have on this topic, women in general, is to build and liquidate a very successful company and show people what truly leading with people first means and being an equitable employer, what that actually means. And sometimes actions speak louder than words. And that has always been my style is, okay, I'll just show you. And eventually you teach people to think about you differently. But I work on it every single day. I'll tell you, I have an executive coach now, and was giving him a scenario of a very early investor of ours who every time would see me at an event would say, "Oh my gosh, you look so great. How are you doing?" Never asked me about the business, never asked how we're doing. And I just didn't know how to react to it. And fast forward, I haven't seen said investor in years, but I had to ask this executive coach, I said, "What's your advice? Like, what would you," and he goes, "You know what you say? You say, 'Great to see you too. Let me tell you how the business is doing.'" And you turn around and you regurgitate everything that's going on in the business. And so that again is under this theme of control what you can control, and your reaction is everything. And so they may have this unconscious bias and they may not ask the right questions or may have the wrong reaction. But what you can't control is jump in and also have those allies around you, right? I was very fortunate in my life to have amazing male allies around me who always supported my career, and who would point it out and give me that space. Same thing, right? Stacey and I both have partners who will say, "Oh, and here's my incredible wife, and guess what she does," right? And you need to surround yourself with those humans, right? Because it's not going to change overnight. But can't stress enough, like control what you can control, right? And so I'll leave you with that for that.
Thanks, Maria. It's wild how quickly these hours can go. I can keep talking, but I think we have time for just one final question that will hopefully leave our audience with some thoughtful takeaways for their own careers. So the question is this: what is a piece of great advice you were given early in your career, and how did you apply it? Suzanne, let's start with you.
It was so simple. I had a director who said, I asked her, "How do you do all the stuff that is on your plate? It's just crazy." And she said, every day I identified the one most important thing to get done that day. And I make sure that I do that one thing. Maybe I do more, but at the very least, I do that one thing. And if I accomplish that one thing, I feel good about myself. And at the end of the week, when you're reflecting on your week, you have accomplished 5 things. And so often I've been at the end of the week and look back and think, what did I do this week? I can't even remember anything that I did. This has been a blur. But since I applied that, it was, and some things are such small little things. But at the end of the week, I then look at all 5 things that I did, that I set my goal and I did. And mentally what that does for you is amazing.
I love that advice, Suzanne. So identify the most important thing for each day, accomplish that thing. At the end of the week, you'll have 5 things. You can always feel like you're achieving. Stacey, how about you?
Yeah, it's something that my team knows this, assume positive intent. It was given to me early on because I didn't assume positive intent. And I kind of had to work through those consequences. But you know, things move fast in work and life, and there are so many opportunities to misinterpret something or react in a negative way or overthink something and get in your head. And I think if you can start by always assuming positive intent, it will, I think, serve you very well. I think it'll earn you a lot of respect. You will learn a lot, and it's a very humbling way to kind of, you know, manage your life and manage your team and kind of the relationships around you. So that would be my advice.
Awesome. Assume positive intent. I know that is one of Maria's favorite pieces of advice. And Maria, can you close us out? What is one piece of advice you received early in your career?
Yes. Life is life, just like your career is a journey. There is no destination, right? Everything's a journey. And I was very impatient early in my career. I was probably the opposite of some of you, where it was like, I had to do this by a certain age and and I had this whole thing mapped out. And what I've come to find out is just how true that is. Enjoy the journey. It's too easy to obsess over the next title, the next comp change, the next, tool on your tool belt. enjoy the journey. Like we're learning, we're growing each and every day in what we do, and just reflect on that. Because my career was a jungle gym. It wasn't a linear path. I took a lot of steps back to take steps forward and pivoted along the way. And I just can't stress that enough. It's enjoy it just like you do your life, and treat it as a journey versus a destination.
Thank you so much. So there's a lot of really amazing advice, guidance, stories shared today, but I think that last question is the one that I just want to highlight. And so if you take anything away from today's webinar, it's that you have the opportunity to identify one important thing to do every single day. At the end of each week, you'll have accomplished 5 important things. Assume positive intent, and to always remember that your career is a journey to enjoy it. I want to go ahead and thank Maria, Stacy, and Suzanne for an incredible panel today. It was just an absolute pleasure having this discussion. It's truly inspiring to hear from leaders in such different roles about similarities that you have all faced. And I think the attendees can take so much from this conversation, both for their own careers and for fostering the careers of their teams. And so I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your experience with our viewers today. To our audience, I'm so glad that you tuned in and spent the hour with us. We hope that you gleaned some valuable knowledge and have many takeaways after today's event. And a heads up, our survey is about to pop up on your screen at the end of today's presentation. By completing the survey, you'll help us create events that you want to attend in the future. And we really do take your comments into consideration. So thank you in advance. The recording will be sent out to you at the end of the day today. And lastly, we are currently in the throes of our Moxie Awards here at Built In, and have an incredible list of judges ready to award winners who have made outsized contribution to their places of work, community, and industry as a whole. You have until March 31st at 11:59 p.m. Central to make nominations, and more info will be shared in the follow-up email after this webinar today. And to close this out the same way we opened it up, I invite everybody to just take a collective inhale and exhale. Thank you so much for joining today. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day and take all of this great advice with you in your career journey moving forward.
Thank you.